I run a YouTube agency, and over the last 12 months, I've gone from using ChatGPT just once or twice a week to using Claude on pretty much every piece of work that goes out the door. And today I'm going to show you 5 things Claude did this very week to grow my business. We'll start with the simplest, end with, to be honest, the messiest, and in the middle I'll show you the SEO Automation project that's currently driving record traffic to our blog. Hi, I'm Ed, co-founder of Humble&Brag, the full-stack YouTube agency for startups. Let's get into it. If you're trying to grow a personal brand or a company brand on LinkedIn, you've probably already had this conversation with yourself. You know you should be posting more, you know image posts and carousels do better than plain text, but the second you sit down to make one, you realize you need a graphic, and you're not really a designer, or at least I'm not. And then another quarter goes by where the channel that should be filling your sales pipeline does basically nothing. So I picked this up from an awesome 9x live stream just last night, where Jan and the team showed how they're using Claude Cowork to spin up branded LinkedIn graphics in a matter of minutes. So the workflow I've ended up with is dead simple. You drop in 2 or 3 example graphics so it knows the look you're after, and then you drop in your brand pack so the colors and fonts come out right. You write the line or quote or content that you want on the card, and then it gives you back something you can post. So yeah, as you can see, I started with some simple Twitter cards, and then I moved on to carousels, which is a little bit harder to get right, but operates on the same principle. And it all took me about 30 minutes. And once I developed a skill out of that, the card that I posted this morning took about 90 seconds from start to finish. So for me, on LinkedIn, the bottleneck was never the ideas, it's always been the design. And Cowork, thankfully, basically removes that. So you can kind of consider that the warm-up use case. The next one is something I do for almost every video that we work on. And it's where, to be honest, I felt the biggest difference in the headspace. So number 2, video research with connectors. So this is basically the work that goes into a brief before anyone writes a single line of script. And at Humble&Brag, we do a lot of this. This week, for example, I've been researching government-funded education in Germany for one client, how diet affects blood pressure for another client, and how composers build emotion in their listeners for a music app. So you can imagine 3 completely different worlds, 3 completely different audiences, and 3 areas that I knew very little about, to be honest. So the solution? I've built a workflow in Claude Code that runs the research in a single pass. It uses connectors to the YouTube API so it can see what's actually performing in a niche and what's coming up in the comments. It uses VidIQ for search volumes and trend data, and it uses Ahrefs for the keyword opportunities that might get the content ranking in Google's AI overviews and in video search. So there's a research skill that we've written that pulls all of that into a structured brief, and a separate branding skill drops it into our house style. So it's ready to share with the client without me having to format anything at all. So yeah, what used to take 2 or 3 days of tab switching now happens in a single workflow. And the brief that comes out the other end is more thorough than anything I'd build by hand. So yeah, the research skill and workflows, the briefing has been pretty effective. The next one that I'm going to talk about has been growing our traffic faster than anything we've ever done before. So the third thing is SEO automation. And this is the biggest project that I'm working on right now internally. So growing a blog opens up so many other opportunities. It's more traffic, more authority, which means more citations in AI tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity, and more inbound from people who already trust you by the time that they hit that contact form. So if you ever worked in editorial work or SEO, you know there's always a long tail of articles you'd love to write but never quite do. For example, you spot a keyword in Search Console, or you see a question in Ahrefs that nobody in your space has really answered properly. You know the article would be super useful and very specific to your audience, but the volume is just too low to justify the production cost, so it just never gets briefed and it never gets done. But this workflow flips that calculation because the cost of producing the article has dropped so much. So the articles that basically previously weren't worth writing are now absolutely worth writing. Let me give you a very specific example. So we wrote a piece this week on how much a YouTube agency costs. Now that's not a high volume keyword, but it's a really useful piece of information for the kind of person who would hire us. So we did the research, brought in our actual numbers and the numbers from other agencies and published it. And this is the kind of thing AI is very good at and provides an actual utility to people. Now this workflow uses the same Ahrefs and Search Console connectors that we just discussed in the research phase in the last step. But instead of pulling data for a single brief, it surfaces the topics most likely to win for us. Then it drafts the articles using the same kind of frameworks and original scripts that we use on YouTube. And that means that not only is the tone of voice consistent, but also we have all the original research, the proprietary data, and the anecdotes that really brings the content to life and makes it valuable. That post then gets pushed automatically in draft mode to our CMS, and the final step is Callum or me reviewing the article and pressing publish. And you can see the impact of all of this work just here. The line is going up and to the right, just how we like it. And we're hitting record traffic pretty much every single week. So yeah, we're not really writing blog posts anymore. We're running a system that finds the gap, drafts an article, and publishes it to our CMS. And our job is to manage the overarching strategy. So that's the content side of SEO sorted. The next one is the technical side. And this is where things got a bit more experimental this week. So the fourth thing is what I'd loosely call a technical SEO experiment. And it's probably the messiest of the 5 things that I've done this week, because we're still in the middle of running it. So the geekier viewers among you may have heard of Schema Markup and structured data and Core Web Vitals. And if so, well, you're probably nodding along but have done very little about it. It's exactly the kind of thing that you'd want to get prioritized in the developer backlog, but they would never get to it. And all of that is particularly problematic in the age of AI search, where the engines are relying and pulling from structured data much more. So this week I've been using Claude in Chrome alongside Claude Code to take this on directly without the help of any developers. It all starts with the agent going and looking at how competitors structure their schema in the browser and also referencing all the best practices from Google. It brings those patterns back and then we adapt it directly in Framer using Claude in Chrome. Not only that, we're also building out new watch pages so we can run a proper before and after experiment and see whether all this technical work actually moves the needle. We implemented it yesterday and we had record traffic yesterday, but it's still early days and I'll report back on the findings in another video. But the point of this segment isn't really the result. The point is that it's another bottleneck that's been removed. 5 years ago, this was definitely an engineering ticket that just would never get prioritized. But now it's a Wednesday evening with me scoping it, designing it and shipping it with the help of Claude, doing all the heavy lifting in the browser and the codebase. And that means a whole category of marketing work that used to die in someone else's backlog is now something that one person, who doesn't even have to be that technical, can pick up and run with end to end. Right, the last one is the most meta of the 5 because it's the one you're watching me do right now. So the 5th one is script writing, and that's including the script for this very video. So this is the workflow that's taught me the most about how to actually build with Claude. So if you've ever tried to use AI for writing, you've probably done some version of this. You open Claude or ChatGPT, you write something like, write me a YouTube script about X, and what comes back reads pretty clunkily. Generic intro, generic structure, generic sign-off. So you either give up on AI for writing, which is exactly what I did, or you keep using it and your content quickly starts to sound like everyone else's. But my workflow looks nothing like that, and I can show you how that works because I filmed myself doing it yesterday. So the first thing I do is jot down the rough ideas and a structure on a notepad, the old-fashioned way. Then I open Whisperflow and I walk around and talk through the video much as I would if I was talking it through with Callum over a coffee. Then that transcript goes into Claude, then through a script writing skill that we've built, and then through a copy editing skill on top. And the thing that I want to flag here is the skills part, because I think this is where most people are getting it wrong with AI when it comes to writing. So when you build a skill, the temptation is to try and replace the human in the entire workflow. What I've found works much better is to build the skill around what the human does and keep them in a loop wherever they add the value. So for script writing, that means I still provide a lot of information in the research and I still provide a lot of information at the brief stage. I still talk through the video because that's where the voice comes from, and the skill turns that into a structured first draft, and a second skill helps me edit it. Then I literally read through the draft using Whisperflow and make any corrections to the copy as I read through it. Then based on that information, Claude gives me a final version. And now I'm working on a skill that sits at the other end of the workflow. So it will go through the finished script and identify exactly where the motion graphics and supporting visuals should be for the editor. So when the editor starts with their work, it can be facilitated and accelerated with this document. So that's 5 ways that Claude is helping us grow our business just this week. If you want to see the SEO automation workflow in proper detail, how it surfaces the topics, drafts the articles, and the actual numbers behind that traffic graph, then you can check it out here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.